particularly for tobacco use disorders or tobacco control policies, etc., it has often been seen that the addiction aspects of tobacco, they are often neglected. For other psychoactive substances, alcohol or other drugs, it is recognized that these are addictive substances, and hence, whenever there is discourse on them, the views of addiction scientists, the behavioral scientists, are taken into account. Not so much in tobacco. For instance, as a glaring example, Professor Khilnani sir mentioned about the ICMR white paper committee. Many eminent physicians, doctors for all the disciplines were there. The conspicuously absent were behavioral scientists, addiction specialists who understand tobacco or E&D addiction. So that's the aspect I think has been missing. The missing aspect is that we do not recognize tobacco as being a part of the large family of psychoactive substances which we the human beings have been using since times immemorial. Some of these are more harmful, some of these are less harmful, some of these are controlled more stringently by the governments, by the society, called as narcotic or psychotropics, some of these are not. The reasons are not really scientific in nature in terms of how they are controlled. The reasons are largely political, racial, and cultural, and so on. So one such psychoactive substance is something we all of us used just now. So there is no point in getting too moralistic about it. But that's the unfortunate reality. For a wide variety of reasons, these psychoactive substances are sought to be controlled by the society or by the establishment. What could be those reasons? Because there may be health issues, there may be health risks, or simply on the moral grounds, we do not believe that people should be having fun. People should be using something to change their mental state. Or if at all they are changing their mental state, then they should do so only using those substances which I like. I means the establishment, the government, the society or whoever. And this differs from society to culture to culture. So a combination of these factors have resulted in the kind of policies and attitudes we have towards various psychoactive substances. I'll repeat, I'll just at the risk of repeating what other speakers have already alluded to. All over the world, the management strategies for psychoactive substances can be broadly divided into demand, supply or harm reduction strategies. Now, I will not go into too many details of all of these. What we need to remember is what the supply control strategies, which are actually the most popular despite their very limited effectiveness. Most of us are elite, law-abiding, upper class people who believe a ban means non-existence, right? So in our dictionary, government has banned something which means it does not, it simply is not available. Unfortunately, that is not true. A ban effectively means government saying, I am not now regulating this substance, let the criminals, let the underworld take care of it, right? That's what ban essentially means. In Delhi, if I go and purchase a bottle of whiskey, I can be reasonably sure that whiskey it is, and it must be 42%. In Bihar or Gujarat, I can never be sure that what I am buying in a bottle, whether it contains whiskey or not. In Delhi, if I buy a packet of ganja, I can never be sure whether it contains ganja or not. In the morning, there has been a point made that e-cigarette liquids contain a very high amount of nicotine or contains various other kinds of chemicals. If governments were regulating it, governments can actually keep a tab on how much they contain. At this moment, is e-cigarette available in Delhi? It certainly is. At this moment, can anyone be made accountable on what does that e-cigarette liquid contain? No one can be. But do people want to use e-cigarettes in currently, people? Yes, they want to. Because they say, if I am not allowed to use e-cigarettes, then I will have to continue to smoke. So any discussion on whether e-cigarettes to be regulated as a harm reduction product category or not should also take into account relatively what we are doing about the combustible cigarettes. This is the interesting parts. All of us doctors, we are made to sit somewhere and discuss over our studies on e-cigarettes, how harmful or how beneficial are they. No one among us is paying heed to what's happening to combustible cigarettes. For last so many years, the prices and tax structure on combustible cigarette has been largely constant. In today's terms, looking at the inflation, cigarettes have actually become cheaper than they were 2 years ago. Prices of almost all commodities have increased, but the combustible cigarettes, their market has remained almost at the same level. So this is how we must try to evaluate various products and various their options. About demand reduction strategies, we all know they are needed at a much larger scale. Harm reduction is something we have already discussed. It basically means being more pragmatic, since 80% of something is better than 100% of nothing. A rhetoric of a drug-free world, a smoke-free or tobacco-free world will not take us anywhere. People will continue to find some ways to put nicotine in their bodies. Because whether we like it or not, it's the human requirement. We can be smug in saying, मुझे तो कभी ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ी, मैं तो बिना उसके बड़े आराम से रह सकता हूँ. Well, there are some people who simply cannot. And when we need to find some empathy towards those people. There are people who need tea or coffee. And there may be some of those people in this room. There are others who do not need tea or coffee to remain alert, to remain active, and then they try to feel smug about it, you know. आपको चाय पीने की ज़रूरत पड़ती है, देखो मैं तो चाय भी नहीं पीता हूँ, right? So there is some kind of morality, judgment associated with it. We need to empathize with those people who say that without nicotine they will not be able to function, they will not be able to survive. Survive in the larger sense of the word, not just being alive. And hence, those are the kind of people who would require nicotine delivery in one form or the other. The point is very valid that the products which are available at this moment for delivering this nicotine may not be totally satisfactory. The products which are being marketed and made in the names of e-cigarettes, they may still have some issues. But if we totally ban them, then all the other further path of research and development on them is totally closed then. If they are recognized as possible alternatives, there is still an option to conduct some studies, to do some more research, to bring about more refinements so that nicotine is further regulated, so that the nitrosamine or other hydrocarbons or other harmful substances in those liquids can be reduced, to make them even less harmful and safer, as it were. But as I was saying, there will always be some people using drugs. They are at the risk of morbidity and mortality, and this is the harm reduction which actually provides us an alternative to look at these individuals. In day-to-day life, we know the examples of harm reduction: condoms, helmets or seat belts. These are very well-known examples of harm reduction. For not drinking, or if drinking, driving instead of not driving after drinking. These are kind of some of the other harm reduction alternatives the society has accepted and in fact promoted and encouraged, which I find missing in case of tobacco, which I find missing in case of, and that kind of empathy, I think, is missing largely from our own profession, the medical profession as well. Perhaps the kind of empathy we have for people affected by cancers or addiction or heart diseases as a result of their tobacco addiction is possibly not there when they are at the stage of just suffering from addiction to tobacco. At that point, the people are seen as just as people with vices, people with some bad habits, not as people who require help, empathy and compassion. So basically, these are various ways in which risk or harm of any substance use can be reduced. You can reduce the method, you can change the product which people are using, or you can simply change the context of consuming that drug and reducing the stigma and discrimination associated with it. So a wide variety of these approaches, these philosophical kind of slants can be applied to use of psychoactive substances, including to tobacco, and one of these could be encouraging, promoting, or at least being more accepting and tolerant of those substances which are of kind of reduced risk kind of products. The needle syringe oral substitution treatment, other speakers have also alluded to, are very well accepted. The government of India's national policies actually officially endorse harm reduction as an approach to deal with narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. In other countries, there are other kinds of harm reduction approaches are still being promoted and encouraged. For instance, in some countries there are supervised injection facilities where there are rooms available in the nursing staff supervision. People can bring their own drugs, inject those drugs under the supervision of a nurse, so that if something goes wrong, at least their lives can be saved. So we may wonder, oh my God, this is like encouraging people to take more drugs. Point here is saving his life. Point here is not being making a moralistic judgment about whether he is doing something right or wrong.
So can I just request you to wind up,
I'm just wrapping it up now. Historically, we have been largely a tolerant society as far as psychoactive substance use is concerned. For thousands of years, we have been using a wide variety of psychoactive substances, though we do recognize the abstinence as a virtue. We do recognize people not using a psychoactive substance are somehow better human beings. They have more control over their senses, but we still do not have had historically the concept of haram, paap or punishable crime for using a psychoactive substance. Our constitution does say about prohibiting some products, but which are injurious to health. So constitution does not take a moral stance about using psychoactive substance. It just says health effects which should determine how government deals with particular product. So there are some policies in government which have unintentionally possibly increased the harms of psychoactive substance use, like our ban on availability of opium products has resulted in the burgeoning heroin epidemic that we have in our country, and those are the mistakes which we are right now paying for. Banning e-cigarettes in the absence of not doing much for combustible cigarettes amounts to the same category of unintentionally harm maximization. So we continue to have a poor acceptance, high resistance for tobacco harm reduction, which I think is unfortunate because of various moral, scientific or commercial arguments. But I think we need to sit and find a way around these discussions. What we need as doctors is to work on multiple fronts: appropriate communication strategy, generating evidence and not being shy of examining that evidence, and doing and avoiding all conflict of interest type of allegations. I was particularly happy to see in one presentation a clear disclaimer that that there has been no support from any such industry, and I want to also put this up front. I'll end with this quote by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan: "Drugs have destroyed many lives, but wrong government policies have destroyed many more." Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.